I'm Dr. Amy Nassimran, and this is Divergent Minds. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning back in to Divergent Minds. I am so excited to have a conversation with you all and our guests today about a really important topic. And today we're going to be talking about later in life neurodivergent diagnoses. So, this is something that we are starting to see a lot more of, due to a variety of different factors, whether it's greater acceptance or more awareness of neurodiversity. We're seeing a lot of adults connect with certain neurodivergent traits. They're relating to it more, and they're seeking out a better understanding of themselves as well. And with it, I think the benefit of getting a later in life diagnosis is greater clarity and better understanding of yourself. But I also think it can come with some unique challenges as part of the process, too. So I'm excited to have Ruben Martinez here with us today. He's going to share about his unique experience with this. Thanks for joining us, Ruben.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited, and I think this stuff is really important, so appreciate the time.
Yeah, so important. Thanks for your time. I think that our listeners are going to be able to get a lot from hearing from your personal experience. So, before we jump in, I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself here. So, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure, yeah. So Ruben Martinez, Dominican American, born and raised proudly in the Bronx, New York. Currently now based in Austin, Texas. Grew up, can go through into all of that, but I would say today I'm really lucky that I get to lead a product operations team at a tech company,
Hmm.
and that's kind of like been the perfect fit for me, even though I've done many, many other things in the past. And yeah, that was a little bit about me. And then,
Yeah,
oh,
great.
go ahead.
So it sounds you love your job. You've lived in a couple different states across different parts of the United States. How would you describe your neurodivergent identity today?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 26, so a bit
Mm-hmm.
late in life,
Mm-hmm.
and still identify as someone with ADHD. I've gone back and forth with on meds, off meds, on meds, all that stuff, and I'm sure we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk through the journey. But yeah, I would say I'm someone who lives with ADHD and navigates that.
Yeah. And when did you first suspect that you might have ADHD?
Good question. Honestly, it wasn't till right before I explored a diagnosis. I would say I
Mm-hmm.
always throughout my life felt like my mind was always racing. But
Mm-hmm.
because externally I've got such a calm demeanor,
Mm-hmm.
it was hard to ever express that to people, or they wouldn't really like believe me.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I just always thought, I was pretty decent at school. And so people would say, like, oh, you can't possibly have like ADHD or anything because your grades are
Uh-huh.
good, you know?
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, it wasn't until people around me, coincidentally at work, actually started talking about how they had gotten some help and seen a psychiatrist. And I was like, you know what? I've got the health benefit. Might as well talk to someone. And sure enough, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hearing a few different things that I think, is a common experience for a lot of neurodivergent adults and kids too, right? So first thing I'm hearing is you were good at school, or at least the very least you got decent grades. So you were
Mhm.
performing well academically. And I think I see that happen to a lot of the kids that I'm working with, the families that I see in my practice actually, where um they do well at school, they get good grades, and so the thought is like, well, there's no way you could have ADHD because you're doing well academically.
Mhm.
But one
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean anything about the other, right? The
Oh,
other
yeah.
thing I'm hearing is that it sounds like what you were experiencing inside didn't always match how you were portraying yourself on the outside, and so there's a difference there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there was a big dissonance where I grew up in like a relatively, let's call it like chaotic environment, long story,
Mhm.
all that
Mhm.
stuff, first generation, standard, just hardships overall.
Yeah.
And I learned at a very young age, or part of what I've learned through years of therapy now is that part of my coping mechanism was to learn how to escape. And so I think I got really good at being very calm and unflappable to the outside world.
Mhm.
But that like mental chatter and racing never left. I just never talked about it, until I was an adult.
Yes, yeah. In a way, it's like you learn to compensate or to mask to sort of blend in and fit in with the expectations.
100%, 100%. Yeah. And
Mhm.
funnily enough, I did theater all through high school and college. And so now as an adult, I kind of wonder like, oh, was that me kind of leaning into the masking and the pretending and not like being myself? And
Ah,
so, anyway, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, what you mentioned, part of what led you to first suspect a potential neurodivergence was hearing about other people talk about it, especially at work. Can you share a
Yeah,
little bit more about that, or maybe what was going
absolutely.
on at the time that, led you to follow up on it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I had just moved to Austin to take a job actually at Facebook, I guess now called Meta.
Mhm.
And at the time, anyway, the company was really great with its health benefits and also really open about, they want folks to be their authentic selves at work and create space for folks that have neurodivergent tendencies or diagnoses and things like that. And much to my surprise, of my first time I ever saw this at work, there was an internal channel or group where folks would talk about their challenges, and some folks had ADHD, some folks wrestled with anxiety, with depression, and it was like so mind blowing to me that in a work environment, folks felt comfortable and safe to
Mhm.
talk about this and engage this, and it was like the
Mhm.
first time in my life I even considered that it was safe to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how the door was open.
Yeah, that's great to hear about. I'm glad to hear it sort of goes back to, what I'm seeing is that there's greater acceptance for neurodiversity and different ways of working and different ways of thinking. But more than just awareness, it sounds like there's more acceptance of it. So it's something that's being openly talked about at work, and it sounds like your workplace at the time and even currently, it sounds like they're willing to support those diverse thinking needs.
Absolutely, yeah, and that was like a really big mindset shift because again, I grew up in a culture that's not very like accepting about that. I grew up around folks where if you've got mental challenges, then your life isn't hard enough because everyone's life is
Mhm.
so much harder. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, that was it was a perfect example of like you cannot be what you cannot see. And it wasn't until I saw it that yeah, I went and got
Yeah,
talked to
yeah,
somebody.
till you saw it and then being in an environment where it was accepted and supported and easier to talk about.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Are there specific, experiences or traits or characteristics that you really related with at that time?
With my diagnosis,
Mhm.
particular,
Yes.
yeah, I felt so relieved, I think is the word. Like it felt like it finally explained this thing I'd been feeling my entire life and hadn't
Uh-huh.
been able to articulate or trust someone else with like to understand. And so yeah, it helped explain so many things from my past, whether that be a bit of like time blindness sometimes, whether that be things like
Mhm.
um hyper focus, where like
Mhm.
folks
Mhm.
were like, no, you can't possibly have ADHD because I've seen you focus. And it's like, yes, but the way it comes out is that I'm hyper focused and like
Yeah.
really can't see other things sometimes.
Right. Right.
So yeah, very,
Yeah.
very comforting.
That's what I always say. I always explain it that way, that it's not about it's attention deficit all of the time, or like you can't focus your attention, but it's a different way of how attention is focused and regulated. So it's not always and cannot focus. Sometimes it's a really strong focus too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how it
Yeah.
came out for me for sure.
Yeah. I heard you describe it as relief, right? That's such a common emotion that I hear from people getting a diagnosis, especially later in life, right? It's sort of like, finally I have there's a name for what I'm experiencing, or there's a name for, that describes what I've been feeling, and it's not that there's something wrong with me personally.
Absolutely. And the fact that, it was a bit of a mixed emotions because I felt very relieved
Mhm.
and I felt very like accepted. And
Mhm.
especially because I opened this door because of a conversation at work, I suddenly felt like, oh, okay, like this is okay to talk about. And then I had the kind of the other side of the experience where when I shared it with folks that were not from work, who were more like family members or more like from the Dominican culture, which is where I'm from,
Mhm.
that was like less receptive. And so balancing that was really tricky.
Ah. Yeah. So relief and acceptance on one hand, and then maybe confusion or not as much acceptance on the other hand from different people in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it just led to the same, it's like, okay, well, maybe my generation or this generation cares a bit more about mental health. And I can understand how prior generations, they didn't really have a vocabulary to talk about it, or they didn't really have the safe spaces to talk about it, or the safe
Mhm.
kind of cultural guidance to talk about it.
Mhm.
And so navigating that was tricky, but over time, I learned that it's something that I'm navigating, and that's okay. My brain is perfectly okay and normal, and I'm
Yes. Yeah.
capable to do good things. So
Right, right. It's yeah, I like how you said it. Your brain is perfectly normal and capable, right? It's about it's different, and there might be a name that explains some of the very unique challenges, but also brain strength. So you're getting to know yourself in a different light with maybe, that has a name to it.
exactly. Yeah, it
I
was.
I go ahead.
Mhm. just like what you're tapping at is super important, where I needed to make sure, and thankfully I've landed on the right side of this spectrum, where like I didn't want to view it ever as a weakness so much as just something that helps explain some tendencies I have that I can then
Totally.
learn how to better navigate.
Yeah, for sure. I am curious about your experience disclosing your later in life diagnosis to family members and friends too, or maybe it wasn't talked about as much. And to your point, I think there can be very stark generational differences in terms of how neurodiversity is looked at and how
Hmm.
it's accepted. But I also think, there's a cultural piece there that's important to point out as well. So, can you share a little bit about what that was like for you to navigate the disclosing of that with family members and friends?
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, it was really hard and a little awkward
Mm.
because at the very beginning, they just didn't really take it seriously. It's
Mhm.
a bit more old school, old fashioned, and again, like, "Oh, if you've got a mental issue, then like your life's not that hard." Like that's like
Mhm.
fake news.
Mhm.
And that was tricky in the very beginning. What I can say is that I felt very, let's say, like, confident or resolute in knowing that it was so helpful for me to get that diagnosis, and it helped me learn how to navigate mental health challenges better, and it kind of
Mhm.
introduced me to this whole world and vocabulary to take care of myself better. And
Mhm.
because I've had such a good, let's say, journey through that process, what I can do and what I've stuck focused on is trying to lead by example. And so at family reunions, family gatherings,
Uh-huh.
I'm very open about like how therapy has benefited me, how
Yeah.
getting help with ADHD has really helped. And it's been, I don't know, close to 10 years, I guess, since that
Uh-huh.
initial diagnosis.
Mhm.
But sure enough, over the past decade, I've got siblings that have now talked to therapists once or twice and gotten
Wow.
help for stuff that they need. Folks around me who would have never talked about anxiety or talked about certain things, but they
Mhm.
now have a vocabulary for like, oh, I think I am experiencing anxiety, and that's okay. That's not something that's a weakness or anything like that. And so, yeah, it started off really tough, but I
Uh-huh.
think leading by example and giving people permission around you to be okay. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
I
been good.
love how you said that. I think that's so important, right? Because I think, yeah, tough at first, especially if it's not the common perception or the common understanding within the family or within a group. But what I'm hearing is you standing your ground, you advocating for yourself, then led to you setting a really great example for maybe even the younger generations or other people who maybe previously wouldn't consider seeking out a diagnosis or therapy. It opens up the door for them to be able to. So your compounding effects of your actions sound like it's creating greater acceptance within your family and friend unit too.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm flattered. Yeah, and it's almost like a permission to be your real self and authentic self.
Mhm.
I think I spent so much of my life up until that diagnosis trying to hide it, trying to mask it, as you said earlier, like trying to pretend it wasn't a thing. And
Mhm.
you kind of live these different lives. And finally, when you give yourself permission to say, no, like I navigate these things just like everyone navigates a bunch of stuff throughout life, and that's okay. This is my unique set of things to figure out.
Yes. Yeah.
And if I put in the effort and slowly but surely better understand myself, then that can only lead to good outcomes.
Yes. Yeah.
So for
Well
sure.
said. Yeah, I think the underlying message there is, again, it goes back to the whole theme of neurodiversity, where it's not wrong to have a different way of thinking, right? It's just different.
Absolutely. Yeah. We
Totally.
all have our own
Yeah.
unique things to navigate. So,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah, for sure. So I am curious about the diagnostic process for you. If you're willing to share a little bit about that, it sounds like you're first hearing about neurodivergence from work and you're taught having these conversations at work with colleagues. What was it like for you to take that first step to seeking a diagnosis?
Oh, good question. I think I was just like extra motivated and was so amazed at what I was seeing at work. And
Mhm.
I was like, you know what? Let me just find a local psychiatrist and set up a meeting for the first time ever.
Uh-huh.
And thankfully, she's my wife now. We were just dating at the time, but she was very supportive and was like, it
Mhm.
can't hurt. And yeah, went in. I didn't know what to tell them. I didn't know that it was ADHD. I just explained like the way that my mind was always racing and the way that I had a
Uh-huh.
really hard time turning things off. And they had me take this test. I'm forgetting the name of it, but I sat at a
Yep, that's right.
computer
Uh-huh.
for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And
Mhm.
then don't know what the results were like, but they came back a few minutes later and they were like, oh, yeah, sure enough, you look like you're you're experiencing ADHD for sure. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Was that process to finding that evaluator in the beginning for you difficult or easy? Because I hear from a lot of people how challenging it can be just even to take that first step and search for the right provider.
oh, great question. I'll be honest. I just looked up like a local psychiatrist and went to
Mhm.
the one that was like closest to my house. And
Okay.
perhaps I should have, done more research or tried to find the right person. But yeah,
Well, no,
yeah.
I think that's a good point that sometimes it doesn't the search process doesn't have to be challenging and difficult, right? It sounds like these days there are a lot of resources online where you can search for somebody nearby, and finding a local provider might be a good starting point for some people.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to hear for the first time that you had ADHD?
I think for sure it was a sense of relief for sure
Mhm.
because I think I went in there thinking that maybe it would be ADHD, and I had just done a little bit of digging around what a psychiatrist even focuses on or what they can talk to me about.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and so I think had I taken that test and it came back that I don't have it, I think that would have been more of a surprise
Yeah, and confusing, right?
and
Because if
confusing.
it's not that, then what is it? Because what it wouldn't, you still wouldn't have an answer to what you were experiencing.
Exactly. So it was
Mhm.
like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, all right, well then great, and I did this for myself, like I got clarity. So yeah,
Yes.
it just immense
Yeah.
relief, I would say.
Relief. Yeah. And then another common question that comes up after somebody is diagnosed for the first time is, well, what now? What do I do with this new information, and how do I move
Hmm.
forward with it? What advice
Hmm.
do you have for somebody who might be in that position?
My honest advice is take it slow. What I mean by that is that it's been many years since that diagnosis, and honestly, I think I'm still navigating it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Where originally right away, I was given medication to
Hmm.
help,
Hmm.
and the medication was fantastic. It
Hmm.
almost felt like a cheat code for life, and I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, this is how normal people feel like all the
Yeah.
time. This is
Uh-huh.
amazing.
Uh-huh.
And then slowly but surely, I started noticing that I was behaving a bit differently on meds versus off meds,
Mhm.
or when it waned off. And
Mhm.
I just started to notice that I started to feel a bit different than my normal self. And so then there's a couple cycles of changing different medication, trying other things. And then I got certain nervousness around long term. What does it mean?
Mhm.
Because I know that you've got to have to up your intake slowly but surely. And
Mhm.
what effect does it have on your brain? And anyway, it's been a long journey of like, is medication the right fit? Is it
Yeah.
not? And I think that's just so unique to each individual. That it's take it slow and like do
Right.
what works for you.
Yeah, take it slow is a really great advice, because it is, I think, even aside from the medication piece, like first coming to terms with your new understanding of a diagnosis, even if it's something you were expecting, I think can take some time, right? In terms of learning about what that means for you and your life. And then yeah, I think navigating certain changes in medication or the right fit is something that I often hear from clients it's a process that can take some time. It might not be the first prescription right away that works, but something that takes some time to figure out.
Absolutely. And I think what I would also add to that is that,
Mhm.
again, I think whether or not to take medication, it's a personal decision between someone and their doctor for sure. But
Mhm.
I would just encourage folks to remember that even if you do end up getting prescribed medication, like that isn't like the silver bullet or the catch-all that'll like fix everything. Like it's something that you kind of need to learn how you need to evolve your life and your
Mhm.
environment to better navigate this. And so,
Yeah.
for example, once I got clarity that, I'm just kind of prone to these types of behaviors or these mental patterns, it
Mhm.
helped me better understand that, okay, well, if I don't want to be, let's say, like a victim to that circumstance, I
Mhm.
want to learn how to channel that and navigate that and still be effective in this world, then it helped me understand that I need to build certain systems for myself to help hold me
Mhm.
accountable because my
Yeah.
brain's not going to do that automatically. And funnily enough, that like led me down this operational path, and now I lead product operations. And so like from this sense of lack of things that didn't feel normal and natural to me, kind of
Mhm.
led to this strength where I'm really good about thinking through, okay, how do we build a system around this to hold anything accountable? And
Uh-huh.
that started with myself, having to do that for myself and this
Yeah.
ADHD.
Yeah, totally. To your point, you're right. Like there's not medication's not a quick fix. It's not, a magic bullet that's going to fix everything. But I am curious when you say finding systems that work for you, what was that process like? How did you come to find those systems?
Oh, I wish, it's funny. I'm that friend in people's life that has read so many different success books and personal
Uh-huh.
development books and
Uh-huh.
was always under this impression that like I was just like a book away from like knowing how to live like a perfect, great life. And I had this really funny moment years ago where I was reading some book that had been highly recommended for years,
Hmm.
and it sounded like all of the same advice that I had heard in all these other books. And that was like this aha moment where it was like, okay, you can hear the best practices,
Hmm.
but ultimately in life, you just have to iterate and see what works for you because it works differently for folks. So, to your question, I tried so many different apps that were habit trackers, that were timers, that were
Hmm.
to-do lists and productivity apps,
Hmm.
and those were apps that had been recommended to me by so many different people, but a bunch of them didn't actually work for me. But I'd say my advice would be to make sure you just keep at it until you find what does work for you. And so now I've got like a
Yes,
suite of apps that I rely on that like really keep me on track. But yeah, took a long
totally.
time.
So giving people that permission to trial and error, right? And to tweak it to fit their individual needs and how their brain works.
Absolutely. And I think folks, maybe all folks, but especially neurodivergent folks, I think when we try something that we're optimistic about and then it doesn't work, that can be
Hmm.
like deeply demotivating and you feel like, oh, there's like, is any of this really worth it?
Yeah.
But now that I'm kind of at the stage where I have found the patterns, the systems, the apps, the reminders that do work for me, I would just encourage people to keep going and keep at it.
Yeah, totally. Great advice. It's I'm laughing because it's such a common theme. We just had this conversation that earlier this week about, it's one of the most important things you can do is to find systems and tools and strategies that work for you specifically. And a lot of what is out there, the standard way of how you're supposed to do things doesn't always work with how a neurodivergent brain wants to do things. So being able to tweak it and individualize it to you and how it works for you sounds like something that's really important.
1,000%. And again, I
Yeah.
say that only because I have the lived experience of thinking that if I could just find the best practice and follow that, and whatever I read in a book, that that'll solve everything. And
Hmm.
the real reality as a human is that you've got to figure out what works for you as an
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah. Right. And so for you, it sounds like that might have been a great starting point was to read the books, right? It's not like it was all for nothing, but it sounds like step two to this approach here is then tweaking it and helping it work for you, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And giving
Hmm.
yourself permission to iterate. I think
Yeah.
one small example that's a bit more related to my physical health is that I
Hmm.
always wrestled with eating a bit too much, like very mindlessly eating. And
Hmm.
I tried so many different things, so many different advice. And
Hmm.
funnily enough, the one thing that actually has helped keep me accountable is just logging my food every day. Not with a
Hmm.
calorie like budget or anything like that, but just the simple act of logging.
Yeah.
That's what works for me. For someone
Yep.
else who's really into fitness, they might have a totally different thing that keeps them on track.
Right.
But my general point is like give yourself permission to explore, to try, to figure out that, oh, that didn't work. I'll try something else. But just keep at it until you find like truly what works for you.
Yeah. Explore and try. I think that's a good takeaway there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Ruben, I am curious now as an adult, you were somebody who was diagnosed, what we consider to be a little bit later in life. How does it change the way that you think about your childhood, if any?
Oh yeah, good question. It's interesting. It helps explain a lot about my childhood, I think.
Mm,
Like I
mm-hmm.
think I have so many memories where I'm like, "Oh, okay." And it's like these endless aha moments you have about life
Yeah.
and your childhood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um I do wrestle with this idea about would it have been better to know sooner than later,
Yeah.
And I think the natural answer I'd want to give is, "Oh, absolutely. Like it was such a relief. Like why wouldn't I have wanted that relief earlier in
Mm-hmm.
life?"
Mm-hmm.
I think looking back on it, I'm actually a bit grateful that it happened to me as an adult because
Mm-hmm.
then I could navigate that as an adult and myself and my partner at the time and our home.
Yeah.
And had it happened while I was still growing up as a child, I'm not convinced as wonderful and amazing as my mom is, I'm not convinced
Uh-huh.
she would have been super well equipped to know
Hmm.
how to best support me,
I
especially
see.
coming from the
Yeah.
culture that we came from, you know?
Mhm, mhm. So in a way, it helped you make sense of certain things, or there might have been light bulb moments or aha moments of like, oh, like given this diagnosis, that made sense as a child, right? But it sounds like gratitude for being able to navigate the process on your own now as an adult your way.
Yes. Yeah. 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 So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus one.
What do you think? What would you say to somebody who's maybe also thinking that they might be neurodivergent, but hasn't yet taken the steps to seek getting a formal diagnosis?
I would say you've got nothing to lose, honestly.
Mm,
And if it's something that you're hesitant about or you're feeling judged about, then do it in the privacy of yourself. You don't have to tell anyone. You can tell a trusted friend. But you've got nothing to lose. And from what I can tell, and I do work in the mental health field these days. From what I can tell, every mental health provider I've ever engaged with sincerely just wants to help and wants to help you be a better version of yourself. And so
mhm.
you've got nothing to lose. Just try it out.
Yeah, yeah. I think a common question that I hear from adults who are in this position is, something like, is it worth it at this point in my life? What's it really going to change? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Certainly, yeah. So I'll be candid that
Hmm.
with my doctor, I've moved off of the medications years ago, and so there's an argument to be made that fundamentally nothing has actually changed in my life. Right? I got the diagnosis, and I'm still, I'm not taking any meds for it.
Hmm.
That being said, like because it gave me a vocabulary to better understand what was going on within me, and
Hmm.
then by giving me that vocabulary and putting me in an environment where it was okay to talk about that, I was then able to grow as an individual and understand that there was nothing wrong with me. And I think that that is so fundamentally important for every human to understand that nothing is
Hmm.
fundamentally broken with you, that I don't think it matters what age you figure that out, but I think everyone deserves to feel that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a great takeaway. So even if nothing comes from it, right? It sounds like at the very least a better understanding of yourself and greater self-acceptance.
Yeah, and again, I would say if nothing comes of it from how like maybe the external world would think about it, but
Hmm.
to me, so much has come of it because I show up more authentically, show up more confidently,
Yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
speak openly around my family who themselves are now getting the help that they need that maybe they'd been putting off for decades,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it affects the way that I show up at work and lead my team because I've got neurodivergent folks that report to me, and I can actually understand and acknowledge kind of what they're going through.
Yeah.
So it's great.
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Yeah,
built, like,
totally.
systems and patterns, and part
Mhm.
of why um, made the choice to move off of medication is that I started to feel more confident and sustained in the systems and patterns that I had built for myself over the years,
Mhm.
but I only went through all of that effort because of the diagnosis and wanting to navigate that,
I see.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like having a map for doing things maybe a different way or a more effective, efficient way that works for you.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah,
Cool. Um, I wanna leave our listeners with a takeaway here or maybe a couple, but I'm
mm,
curious for you, what do you wish that people better understood about getting a diagnosis later in life?
mm. I'll lean on it's kind of what I was saying a second ago. I'll lean on something I learned in a coaching course a long time,
Mhm.
which is that people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And I
Mhm.
think if you can operate your mindset that way, the way you engage with the world completely shifts, and that includes you. So even if there's something that's a bit neurodivergent about you, something that you're navigating, something that doesn't come easily to you, like you deserve to be here, you belong here, and you've got so much to add to the world that you deserve to be feeling your best, whatever it takes, whether that's
Yeah.
a diagnosis, whether that's talking to someone, whatever that looks like.
Right, right. I like that idea, like seeing yourself from a more accurate, accepting lens, right? Rather than maybe viewing your differences as something like something that's wrong with you or trying to conform to certain ways that just aren't working for how your brain works. It's like being able to understand yourself truly and authentically.
Yeah, and it makes all the difference. I
Hmm.
grew up with someone who generally did pretty well in school, got good grades. As I mentioned, I was already working at a really fancy company when this
Uh,
topic even came up. So
uh-huh.
a lot of folks might ask, like, "Oh, like why bother? Like your life was going fantastic, like perfectly fine." What I can say almost a decade later is I am showing up to myself so much
Mhm.
more authentically, and I'm having even more success professionally and in my social relationships now than I ever did back then. And it's only
Right.
because I better understand myself through this journey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And alignment to your point, right? It sounds like on the outside, other people viewed you as somebody who like had it all together, was very successful. Like, what's the point because of getting a diagnosis? Because your life looks great. But
Mhm.
from the beginning, something you mentioned was that it didn't always feel like that on the inside, right? There was racing thoughts, or you felt like there was a lot on your mind. And so what you were experiencing inside didn't always feel like what the world was seeing of you. So now it sounds like there is alignment between how you understand yourself and how the world sees you.
Exactly. Yeah. There was this like dissonance constantly for decades. And then slowly but surely, I think the journey we're all on is how do you get to a place of resonance between your internal and your
Mhm.
external world. So,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. 1000%.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ruben, for sharing about your experience. I'm hearing such important and valuable points here in terms of, to answer the common question of, is it even worth it? What's the
Mm,
point? It sounds like it's worth it for your personal reasons, right? Self understanding, self awareness, greater self acceptance. But it also sounds like potential ripple effects of having that positive impact on other people and helping others understand neurodiversity and neurodivergence in different ways too.
1000%. Yeah. The famous quote that I always think of, it's actually at home here at home, is Marianne Williamson's quote, which is that our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, it's that we're powerful beyond measure. It is our
Mhm.
light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And that when we let our own light shine, we give others around us permission to do the same. And I know that's philosophical and whatnot, but I truly believe that if you can let your own light shine by better understanding and accepting yourself, then everything around you changes. And in doing that, the world becomes a better place. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Awesome. Well, I think you summed it up for us perfectly. So I'm going to leave it right there. I really appreciate you joining us and being willing to share about your personal experience. I think that it's going to resonate with a lot of people and maybe even spark some hope in people who are thinking about their own neurodivergence and maybe haven't taken those steps to seek a diagnosis yet.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me for this conversation. I really
Yeah.
appreciated it.
Thank you. Thanks for spending time with me today. Once again, I'm Dr. Amy Nassimran. Let's keep the conversation going in the next episode. See you there. This audio series is brought to you by Modern Health. The topics presented in this series are intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered a replacement for medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment.